everyone, this is Kathy from the Daily Marker. How are you today? Thank you for watching. Today's day 18 of the 30-day coloring challenge, and I created this card for the WPlus9 blog. I'm a guest designer there today, and I just love the stamp set from WPlus9. So I used the die cut and the stamp set, and first I'm going to be doing the background. So I stamped that nice strip of gorgeous flowers on the negative part of my paper. It's going to be my front card panel. So I'm just stamping it all around the border. And look, it worked hanging off of my Misty there because I just wanted to get those edges. So I'm so glad that worked because otherwise my Misty wasn't big enough. Now I'm using some washi tape here to hold down the die cut. And I stamp my flowers. Now, where the washi was, there was a few little pieces that I just took a Sharpie marker and filled in. Fast forward, I'm using the stamp, the packaging, to reference where I need to add this background. And I'm sorry, I know you guys hate super speed, but all I'm doing is filling in the background with a marker. It happens to be a Copic marker, but there's no fancy coloring. And this video was so long, so I'm just going to slow down the important parts, but I didn't want to not show these parts, so please bear with me. Now I've grabbed the die cut here, and I'm just adding one layer of color, just basic coloring on this die cut here. So I'm adding the pink, and when it's a large areas, I'll take my tip and just trace around and then fill in the centers of that flower. Now, right now, I'm just putting a layer of color on this. Not anybody can do this. So that's why it's going fast, but the title of this video is Mixed Media, and that's because I'm going to be slowing this down, and then after my base layer of Copic markers, I'm going to be putting colored pencil on top. Now this, I have some Copic blending solution on my rag, and I'm just prancing around my paper here, my background, and I just want a little bit of texture. That's all I want. I'm going to be putting vellum on top of this, so I just want a little bit of texture so when you peek through the vellum, if you're peeking, you might see it. Now I've taken, first I did the chisel end around the edges of the paper, and now I'm using the brush tip here just to cover all those white areas where it was die cut. And this is my background here, the vellum on top, and then we'll be working on this piece here, the die cut. And you can go to my blog. So I'm just reiterating how important that gives your card a finished look, to take that around and cover up all those white spaces. And on my blog, I'll have a few more pictures. Now here's the vellum. I've cut a piece to fit my card base, and I'm lining up the die cut there, and I'm using the same washi I used earlier. And I'll be flipping this over just to check that my die cut is in the right spot. There's probably a better way, but sometimes I take the harder way. So I'm just making sure that it lines up there. And then I just ran it through my die cut machine. I know you don't need to see that. And then I'll be gluing that down. So I glued half with my glue pen, and I put a book on top of it, well, this acrylic block, and then I did the other half. That way it gave it time to dry, because those glue pens tend to dry quickly. Now we're going to add some accents to the leaves, and we already had that light layer, so now I'm using a relaxed hand, I'm using the brush tip, and I'm starting at the line, and I'm just kind of sweeping that second color in. I like to call it sweeping because when you're using a broom, you push and then release. So when you sweep, you're pushing down and letting go. And I think that's the best way to get like feathering onto your coloring. So you push down and then lift up. So you just try that, like pretend like you're using a broom, and then you'll see what I'm saying. And then you do the same thing with your marker. Just have a relaxed hand and just kind of let it go. Now I'm doing the same thing on all these leaves. I always start with the lightest color, and then I feather in a medium color and then a darker color on top. So I'm using that medium color to blend out the darkest color, and then I'll bring the lighter color back to make it all work. You could also, what do I call it? But you could color mashing, I think. If you use the right colors, you could take the lightest color and go over the entire leaf, and the alcohol in the markers blends it all and mashes the color together. If the colors, most of the colors work well like that. So now I'm embossing the sentiment. I know it seems random to jump and do this. Now the sentiment is, there's 2 lines of the sentiment, and I decided I wanted one long line, and I learned this trick from Jennifer McGuire, the amazing, awesome, wonderful Jennifer McGuire. And so I've embossed it, and then she did this. It's just genius. So I took a brush after stamping each individual line twice, and then I'm just brushing away the excess, and it's simple as that. I used to cut the stamp carefully, but you don't even need to do that. I mean, how brilliant, right? So I used a paper piercer to pick up some of the minuscule little dots between the letters, and that worked great. Now we're going to go back and finish up that was a little station break. We're going to go back and finish up this die cut here. See, I kind of jump around at home. I don't finish it all in one day. You might even notice my sleeves changing because I didn't do this all in one day. Now I went ahead and I added the Copic blending solution on my nubby rag, and I'm just going around on the leaves here, and I ended up doing it. See how you get that great texture? It's so easy to do, and then you can dry it between so it doesn't bleed, because if you oversaturate it, the color's going to move into the other surface. So if you dry it in between, that helps. And then if some of the color goes out of the lines, you can use your zero colorless blender marker and just clean up those little lines along the edges. Now I've picked up a colored pencil here, and we're doing the mixed media. We're adding colored pencil on top of Copic markers, and it's very difficult to tell here that it doesn't look like much yet, but layering colors is what works best with colored pencils. And even though you have a light, soft layer, you really don't see it. It doesn't come together so much. It takes a while. So you can see it slowly getting a little bit darker, but the biggest thing is to have it, the tip doesn't need to be quite as sharp here, but you do not want to push hard, because then you cannot add more color on top of that. What is the term? I call it waxing out, but there's a much better term. Burnishing it. That's it. If you burnish it, like you rub it hard, and then you have like a wax layer, and you cannot add color or anything on top of it, but it's a cool look. Now I've sharpened my tip, and I'm just adding lines as an accent to all of these petals right now. And the reason why I did the layer of Copic markers first, because I wanted to get a layer of color. I didn't want to spend all day long coloring these flowers. Even though they're gorgeous, I didn't want to spend all day. I'm doing a coloring challenge. I got to color every day, so I have to have something different. So I wanted, plus, if some people don't feel like they're good at blending, I just want you all to feel like successful with one medium or all mediums. And so just trying to give you different tips. So I added that layer of Copic, and then you can see the texture through these lines. So it just gives it a little bit more interest when I use that rag, and then make sure that paper's dry. And now, as you can see, I've picked up a darker red, and I'm adding in the crevices and in the center more color. I want a darker concentration of color on the edges. Like the people that normally always watch my videos, I call it the sweet spot. You always want a sweet spot on a petal. The sweet spot to me is just a lighter area. It doesn't always have to be like incredibly lighter, just subtly lighter. So my pencil is moving around the edges of the petals more than anything. That way I have a sweet spot more in the center of the petals, and I'm not worried about where the light's coming from and all that. I mean, some people do that, but I don't. Maybe one day I will, but I just want to add shadows and just make it look pretty and interesting. Now I'm on this other flower, and again I've got my darkest red, and I was just adding to little nooks and crannies. Now I have a white gel pen. I always like to start it on my finger, and then there's like a little lip or twist on these petals, and I'm adding the white gel pen to those little subtle details in Dawn's gorgeous illustrations. How's that for a mouthful? Now, I've been using a Sharpie marker for years and years and years and years, forever, since I started card making like 8 years ago, I think. And I always outline my images. And right now I was darkening those little lines and the dots in the center of the flowers. Very important to darken those with the Sharpie pen. And yes, you can do it. Just practice on some scrap paper first, or stamp another one and practice on that before you move on to your main image. But I know you can do this. You start at a point and you stop at a point. You don't do the whole thing at once. So I'm adding white dots, and I started on my finger again, and I added them to those black dots in the center of the flowers. And when you're using a gel pen, I like to say, go slow and let it flow. And yes, you can quote me on that. Okay, so now I'm just going to show you parts of this and then speed it up, because I'm doing the exact same thing on these flowers. I just started with a light pink, but I'm actually using the same reds that I used on the larger poppy center flower. I think it's a poppy. Okay, so now I want these flowers to look different than the larger ones. So I'm using my colored pencil to kind of like make a ripple around the edge, just to make it a little bit more interesting. I'm not going for a realistic look here. I'm just going for a fun, artistic look. So I'm just kind of putting a ripple around the edge. And now I'm making sure that this is when your pencil tip needs to be really sharp, and just doing some lines. I'm adding many lines to add depth to these flowers. And I'm using like 2 different colors, and I'm just doing a series of lines. So your pencil's going to get dull, then you sharpen it again. But the sharper it is, the finer the lines are, and it just looks better, I think. Now I'm taking that sharp tip around the edge of this pansy. Is it a pansy? I don't know. Sorry. And now I have the darker color, and I'm just adding to little nooks and crannies and the little crevices. Now, so I'm just finishing up here and doing the exact same thing. And I didn't edit out the sharpening of the pencil, because I wanted you to see how often I sharpen it, even though I sped this up. So I might do a quarter of a flower and then I sharpen it again. I just feel like a sharp line really looks great. And There's a lot of pencil sharpeners on the market, and I'll link one in the supply list. Now, I love adding orange to reds. So I've picked up, this is kind of like a light salmon color because the background that we colored with Copics was a pink. So I'm just using that light coral just to add a little bit of lines on the edges of those flowers, just for an artistic spin. Now, these purple ones, we started with Copic markers, and now I wanted to make these look different than the other two. So I'm trying to think. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm using Dawn's lines as a guide, and I'm taking that dark line in the center and just kind of doing a J shape on the right and the left. So you go down the center and you go a J where it swings the normal J, and then a backward J, and then you color in those lines. But any line that you make, if it's consistent, it's going to look good. I promise. And when you're using colored pencils, you really have to just trust yourself. It's not going to look good right away. It takes layers of color for it to look good. So just remember that. Just follow through, and if you have to leave and go do something and come back, just add another layer, and you will like it in the end, I promise. So just enjoy the process. Watch how it evolves, and see how I'm doing that J there and then the backward J. So if you just, that was just really fun to do. I love doing stuff like that. Now I used a lighter color to soften one side of that J, and then I'm going to go back and add a darker color on one side of the J. And then again, I always go back and add to little nooks and crannies. Wherever there's a little tiny triangular space, that's what I call a nook and cranny, and just add a darker color there, and that will so enhance your coloring. Okay, so that was a lot of fast talking. I hope you picked up a tip. Now this is my card panel here, and I'm adding some glossy accents because we're going to put the die cut in the center there, and I'm like finished. So exciting. I hope you guys like this card. Now I pushed it down. I'm using a paper piercer to make sure that all those edges are snug and tight down. The great thing about glossy accents, it dries quick. Here's my sentiment stripped. I use some foam behind it, and then I use glossy accents, a small amount, to adhere it to my vellum. So thank you so much for watching. I'll have more details on my blog with the color combos and everything. And thank you so much for doing the coloring challenge. You guys inspire me so much, much more than you know. See you next time. Thumbs up if you like this. Whoops.